Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all. I'm super excited to talk about adaptability today. I will start sharing my screen. So, a little bit on me. I have changed careers a ton of times. So I started at George Washington University and I was in the Beta Mu chapter there. And I was also in AK Size Academy. And there I studied international affairs and economics. I knew that I wanted to do international business. So I studied there. And after college, I graduated right after a little bit after the 2008 crash. So it was a really tough year. And luckily, I was able to kind of leverage some internships that I'd done to get a job at Profit Brand Strategy, which is a consulting firm. So I started my career in branding consulting in New York City. And then I was applying. I just kind of wanted to travel. Like I loved my job and I was working with all these huge companies, United Health Group, Johnson & Johnson, Jimmy Dean Sausage. But then I got a Fulbright scholarship and to move to Luxembourg. So I moved to Luxembourg for a year. I researched nation branding, which is kind of how countries brand themselves. And I basically took what I learned at Profit. I basically took the format they use for consulting, and then I applied that to how Luxembourg should brand themselves as a country. After that, I got back to New York City. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I knew I liked writing, but I wasn't really sure like how to use that, especially coming out of marketing. So I started working as a freelance writer, and this is before content marketing existed. So it was really kind of like, oh, this thing where businesses can use writing content online to grow. So I started writing about this thing that was called then Content Meets Commerce and is now called content marketing. But I just felt kind of not ready to be back in the States. So I moved to China. I moved there. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a place to live. I knew 3 people. I was on a tourist visa and I just kind of moved over there and luckily met the director of one of the largest wine importers over there. So then I worked as a brand manager over there, overseeing 14 offices across Greater China, Hong Kong, Macau, and helping sell mainly Australian and New Zealand wine and then 2 US wineries. So I worked over there, loved doing that, but I wasn't doing really a lot of writing. And I knew that's something that I loved. So I was hired by Foreo, which is an international beauty brand. They're sold at 5,000 Sephoras globally. They're kind of a skincare device. And so I oversaw them creating their blog and kind of trying to direct traffic to their blog so that they can make a higher margin than, let's say, if they're sold at Sephora, Ulta, one of their retail partners. So I worked for them and was really enjoying it. They decided to move their office. This is my cat. She's very jealous when I talk to other people, so may interrupt again. They moved their office to San Francisco, asked me to move there. I wasn't really ready to leave China. And so I started running Airbnbs. So I would rent out the Airbnbs from local Chinese landlords. I had a designer who redesigned them. And then I rented them out to other travelers. And then since then, I kind of got involved in the comedy scene in Shanghai, and I was kind of really done with my time there. So I decided to move back to the States, which is where I live right now. I live in Los Angeles. In LA, I am a freelance content writer. Right now, I work with DoorDash, helping them launch their DoorDash for Work, which is selling benefits packages, food benefits packages to companies. So I work with them. I'm helping launch their blog and do content marketing for them. This is just going to be something that happens. Zoom. So I do that for them. And I'm also a freelancer with some other clients. So I work with small and big clients right now. And I'm really getting an interesting outlook on what the market's going to look like when this all ends, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And then what I also do is in LA is I'm a writer, actor, director, which is kind of part of another transition that's coming. And so on that side, I've appeared on BuzzFeed. I have been published in a lot of literary publications, and I just signed with an agent, a lit agent, for my travel memoir. So she's currently pitching that to editors. So as you can see, I have changed careers many, many times. It's just kind of like my path. I know they say, oh, you should stay with one company for forever. I don't necessarily believe that. I believe that you should do whatever kind of feels right for you. But my big belief is that people pay for expertise. That's what companies pay you for. So if you're constantly adapting, that is what the focus needs to be when you change careers. People want an expert in whatever they're hiring you to do. And so you need to show that you're an expert. And when you start off, you're not yet an expert, but that's okay. I have some tools that you can use to kind of like build that up. So starting with that, like, I know a lot of people are like, oh, you should have a website. How do you brand yourself? How do you kind of appear online? I use LinkedIn and I love LinkedIn. I probably get 2 to 3 recruiters contacting me about jobs every week. So my view on LinkedIn is like, they're already bringing the traffic to you. So if you create a website or you're using other types of sites, you have to try and drive recruiters and drive potential job opportunities off of LinkedIn to your site. So that's why I love LinkedIn, because kind of that's already built in. But there are some tools that you can use to increase that traffic. So one thing is keywords. So if you look on your LinkedIn profile, there's that section that kind of when you go down, someone just messaged me on LinkedIn. Okay, that section when you go down, there's a section where you can like choose specific keywords. You can only choose 50. Most people probably see that on their profile and they're like, why am I doing this? I don't get it. So those keywords are used to help rank you when recruiters see your profile. So your recruiters, when they type in a job, they type in specific keywords. And if you have those keywords on your profile, you show up at the top of the people that they might want to hire. So those keywords are extremely important. And you can also have people nominate you and recommend you for those keywords, which is these little like 1, 10, 16. So a great thing to do is just go on Facebook and just, in your private network, be like, hey, friends, do you mind, like, I want to get more clients, or I want to get a job in B2B marketing. Would you mind just recommending me for that? And that'll boost you up in those rankings. So those keywords are extremely important because, again, they get you to the top of the pile. And recruiters will get, when everyone applies, they'll get, this person is a 90% match for this job. This person is a 10% match. Who are they going to look at first? So again, it's like, what is your expertise? How do you get yourself positioned to show that that's you? Other people use social. This is a friend of mine, Krista. She's a copywriter. She has the best Instagram I've ever seen. So I just put that on there if you guys want to check hers out. She uses a lot of client testimonials, which I'll talk a little bit about later, but she also gives tips on copywriting and stuff like that. So I just think that's a good one to check out if you want to like fully brand yourself for business. I personally don't use my social for business. My LinkedIn is solely for my copywriting business. And if you go to my social, it's for my comedy, it's for my writing, it's for kind of the transition that I'm going towards. So I know that sometimes people are like, oh, watch out what you put on social. It's never been a problem for me, but obviously, you don't want to like do anything that's too extreme, but I don't think it's, at least for me, it hasn't been an issue. LinkedIn, like I said, is just like the best place to drive traffic to your profile and get people to see you. And I will give more tips on optimizing your LinkedIn profile later. Okay, so this is about post-COVID marketing trends. What is the job market going to look like? What is our economy going to look like? I am in a unique position because I freelance for a lot of business leaders, And so, DoorDash is a huge company, so I have visibility on kind of their strategic movements forward. But I also have a lot of smaller businesses that I work for. So I've been seeing like, what are the trends in the market? What are their clients doing? What are they looking for? So obviously remote work is a huge trend. It was already a trend before COVID. I've been working remotely for 3 years. So when COVID hit, I saw everyone, oh my God, I'm at home. How do I do this? I'd already gone through that years ago. It saves a lot of money. It's just easier. People are adapting to it. 70% of Americans are working from home right now. So, I mean, it's a huge shift. The North Face just built this huge, beautiful campus that they're not even going to use. They've decided they're going to stay remote after COVID. Twitter spoke about potentially staying remote permanently. Google's spoken about it. It is a trend that's just happening. So there are going to be a lot more remote work jobs. Freelance over full-time employees. The old way that things worked is that you hired people for 40 hours. No matter how much you needed them, you hired them for 40 hours. They were part of your company. That is not as true anymore. I won't get into the politics of Prop 22, but there is a law that just passed in California that says that Uber and Lyft can hire contractors. That is it's just a trend I'm seeing across the board. Companies don't, let's say you need someone, like one of my clients is a hospital, and they need someone to just update their website, let people know about COVID procedures, let people know about when they're doing flu shots, just very quick stuff on their social and on their website. I do about 3 hours of work for them each week. They don't need someone who's full-time. So there's a lot of transition of companies choosing, instead of hiring people full-time, to hire people part-time or as contractors, and have them do specifically what their specialty is. And if you look at another way, like if you're hiring your accounting department, right, a controller maybe costs $110,000 a year. But if you're a small business, you don't need a controller for 40 hours a week. You need them for strategic help, maybe 10 to 20 hours a week. So it's cheaper for you to hire them a contractor controller and then hire a contractor bookkeeper or a full-time bookkeeper, whatever it is. Like, there's ways that you can adjust what you need. And that wasn't really a thing that happened in the past, but it is going to grow, especially as we're in a recession period. People are looking to cut costs. That is going to be a way that they're cutting costs. Automation is another trend. It is so much easier and so much cheaper to automate things. There are so many boring manual tasks that we've all done in any job we've ever had. Those are going to be automated. So that means that a lot of like kind of low skill tasks are going to be gone. They're going to be done by computers. Outsourcing, same goes for automation. It's, do you have, especially with offices closed, do you have a mailroom where you pay for a manager in a full mailroom that processes your mail and then sets it up and sends it to your employees? Or do you just outsource that whole process to a company that does that and is specialized in it? And then everyone sends the files there instead of sending them to your separate offices. There's a lot of that kind of outsourcing going on, and not just like telephone marketing or like customer service. It's happening in other areas of businesses. Decrease in creative agencies. It's been a really tough time for a lot of my friends at agencies. Again, this is just like trends. Like, an agency normally in the past had a very fancy office in the middle of a nice city that they could walk their clients through to show that they were doing really well. That's not really happening anymore. And that real estate and keeping a team on, it's costly versus hiring freelancers or hiring smaller teams. So a lot of that is also changing. So these are just some things like as you go into the job market to keep in mind, because when you're looking at what you want to do, certain jobs are growth areas and certain are not. Okay, so when you look at what you want to do, what is your positioning? So in marketing, we talk about a unique selling proposition. That is what is unique about you. That's how you differentiate yourself. And think about supply and demand. okay, let's say there's a certain number of jobs, there's unlimited supply. If you are not unique, you have to compete with everyone else. But if there's something unique about you, right, you're the only one who offers that. You're unique. That's a reason that they should hire you. So when you think about how you're trying to kind of position yourself, how can you do that? As an example, when I applied for the Fulbright, I speak French. I'm fluent in French. Most people who speak French applied to live in France. So France gets thousands of applications for only a few spots. So, but I looked at Luxembourg. Luxembourg is right next to France. It's in the middle of Europe. You can travel everywhere. It's basically Disneyland. I'm going to be real. And so I speak French. They speak French there. So I applied to Luxembourg. There's very few people who applied to Luxembourg. It's easier to get it. So think about when you're applying to jobs, how do you make yourself unique? What jobs is there low supply, high demand? Those are all things that can help. And then, industry-wise, like think about what industry you are. So I put here, this is, like I said, I get lots of leads through LinkedIn. This is my header. So I say freelance B2B content writer, and then strategist with proven conversion rates and client references. I'll go into conversion rates and client references later. B2B is my industry, business to business. That is my specialty. I help businesses sell to other businesses. That is like a very highly technical skill. And it's one that is in high demand, right? Because selling to other businesses, you make a lot of money. So that is kind of how I position myself. And that's why I get a lot of leads. I could just say that I'm a content writer. How many content writers? Thousands, right? That doesn't help. And then, so I really think it's important to think about what industries you do, which I go into in more detail in my profile on LinkedIn, but also what is your specialty? Yeah. And then proving your expertise. So like I said, people pay for expertise. So you can get that through references and metrics, years and niche. So I always ask my clients to write me recommendations when I work with them. And I've also had former employers write recommendations. A lot of people have been burned. I'm just going to be honest. They've worked with people who aren't professional or aren't good at what they do. They've had to deal with the drama of it. It's just stressful. No one wants to be stressed out. So by being like, hey, other people have enjoyed their experience working with me is a huge differentiator. So you want to make sure that you have those recommendations and, just ask anyone that you've worked with afterwards, hey, would you feel comfortable? I know it feels a little awkward, but it's super easy. Oftentimes they'll be like, oh, would you mind writing one for me? So I've written some of these, but they put it on the profile. So, and then metrics. So I've helped a lot of people with their resumes over the years, and people just list what they've completed. Like, oh, I managed a team that helped complete X. Cool. Not differentiating, doesn't really tell me if you're good at it. You did it. Good job. Are you good at it? That's where numbers come in. How big was your team? Managed a team of 10 people, managed a team of 2 people. That's fine. Now I know if my job is going to have a similar size or slightly larger, I know that you can handle it. Conversion rates. So for these, I put, like, for example, average drip email campaign open rate, 38%. I put the industry project or product that I was working on, a project management tool, how long it took. I looked up online, what is the industry average? Oh, the industry average is 19.81%, and I was hitting 38%. They can say, oh, wow, she did better than what is normal in that area. So, it took me time to do all of this research, like gross retail sales, 48% increase. That was an article that came out like 3 years after I worked there, but we did a whole, transitioned the whole model of the company. So by finding these numbers and taking the time, you can really show that you're actually good at what you do. And that speaks volumes. I've mentioned these kind of numbers in interviews that I've done, and you can just see their eyes light up, or you can see them be like, oh, perfect, because they get it. And that's how, right, whoever's hiring you probably has KPIs, key performance indicators, that they're ranked on in order to get a promotion or move up in their career. If you can prove that you can help them do their job better, great, then they don't have to worry about it. They can focus on other things. So that's why it's really important to take anything that you've done and try and find numbers to prove, that it was a success. So like when you're writing your resume, at least each job should have one kind of bullet that talks about the metrics and how you performed at the company. Okay, building your expertise. So when you're adapting from one career to another career, or changing jobs, or whatever it is, when you start the new career, you don't have the expertise in it. And that's okay. It's just about kind of how you talk about what you do and how you build that. So my view is, I'm a huge fan of apprenticeship. I'm a huge fan of working under someone who does what you want to do to learn how to do it. And you have to keep in mind your salary is going to be lower than you want it to be because you don't have expertise in that specific thing yet. Obviously, you can transition what you've already done and use that. There's skills that you've used, right? Like maybe it's you've managed people. Maybe it's you're really good at the specific process. Whatever it is, you can obviously take. It's not like you just appeared and don't know what you're doing. You've worked in an office, you know what you're doing. Now you're trying to do a new thing. And so it's just really about like showing that. Yeah, she agrees. So that's very important to think about. And so, you're not going to have your dream rate probably when you start, but if you can find someone that you really respect in that field who's willing to train you, that's the fastest way to build it. And as you go, you can slowly increase your rates. If you're looking at freelance or contractor roles, I have a thing where, depending on how many clients I have and how like financially stable I am, because as a freelancer, your rates, like your business is. See if I like something. It's okay. Your business is always going up and down. And so depending on how many clients I have, I will charge a certain rate. So if my schedule's really booked, I charge a higher rate. If I kind of need the money a little bit and it's a slow period, I'll charge a lower rate. But slowly, as you build your portfolio, you're going to get higher and higher paid clients. And so then you'll have your portfolio filled with clients at that higher rate. So just something to think about of like how you price yourself. Okay, developing a portfolio. Once again, you need to show that you have an expertise. So having elements of things that you've already done that you can show is a big differentiator. Right now, for example, I'm writing a lot of thought pieces about the future of businesses post-COVID, how they're changing. Being able to show that I did that for one, like a white paper for one client, showing that to another client who's also seeing an evolution in their industry, they were like, oh, she gets it. She knows how to do this. And they can get a feel for my style as well. So whatever you're doing, think about, what conversion rates do you have from what you've done in the past? What examples of work you've done that you can show? Is it a website you've worked on? Is it a brochure you've worked on? Is it, something else? Like make sure you have things that you can show. Get out the word. Most jobs are found through people. Like I said, tons of people have been burned. They've dealt with difficult people. They've had to go through that struggle. We all have. It's not fun. So getting out the word and getting a referral is one of the best ways to get a job. So when you're looking, like I said, I'll use my Facebook just in my private profile with all my friends. Will be like, hey, I have some availability right now. If anyone has anyone who's looking for a freelancer, like definitely let me know. Something like that. Okay, set appropriate prices for the long term. This is more, again, if you're freelancing or contracting. The biggest reason I see freelancers fail is because they charge too little. And how much you charge determines how much you're going to make in the future. So as you think about how much you're making at a job or taking on a project, make sure that the rate is something that you can survive on. And like I said, you can then move your prices higher and higher. But um, if you're not getting benefits and you're making minimum wage, which is unfortunately a situation that a lot of people are in right now, like that's not sustainable. You're gonna run into issues, and it's really really hard to pull that off. So if you are gonna not be full time, make sure that the rates you're charging account for the fact that you will have slow periods in your business, and being able to afford yourself so just some things to think about. Okay, trust your gut, say no to red flags. So I've had some terrible red flags, and whether it's like full-time jobs I've accepted or it's clients that I've accepted, if you come out of the meeting and you're like, this sounds perfect, but something inside me says this isn't a good idea, listen to that. You know, things are going to constantly change. And at the end of the day, you have a gut feeling about what's right and for you. And so if you're seeing, I'll give an example. There was one company that was hiring me, and they really didn't fully outline what the job was. So one, that red flag is they don't know what they're hiring for. So how do you perform well if they don't know what they're hiring you for? Two, I was supposed to interview with one of the founders, and they constantly would just be like, oh, can you meet in 1 hour here? And it's like, okay, this seems a little bit like a red flag that they can't, they expect me to like jump up from wherever I am and be there. That's not really normal. And I know that they're super busy, but it's also just like a little bit of a red flag of what it's going to be like to work with them, that you're expected to drop everything at a dime and be there. And if you're cool with that, great, perfect. Then that's the right job for you. But if you're not cool with it, which for me personally, I like to have a lot of freedom in kind of the work that I do, it's not going to be a good fit between you. So just if you have that gut feeling, listen to it. Okay, setting expectations when you're adapting to a new job or new career path or whatever the transition is you're making. You're going to make less money at first, like I said, because you don't have the expertise. So, personally prepare for that. Don't overextend yourself. And also, don't feel discouraged by that. But that's something that's just part of transitioning. Usually, I'd say it takes 2 to 3 years to get up to like a good solid place when you transition careers. So that first year is going to be a very low income year, and you're going to make a lot of mistakes, and it's going to be tough, but long term it'll be worth it. But just, emotionally, financially prepare yourself for that. Leveraging your past experience when you're, read the job description, think of what you've already have experience doing. Make sure that you have some bullet points of things that match what's described in the job description that you can use as examples. That way you can show, okay, I might not be perfect for this, which you'd never say on the call, but you can give examples of things that you've done in the past. And then again, say no to red flags, trust your gut. Yeah, so that's all on my end. Any questions?
Well, thanks, Kristen. That is amazing. You've definitely had the career and the adaptability to like shift focus and whatnot. So that's really awesome. Dan kicked us off with one of the questions, kind of in jest, but how do you top I got involved in the comedy scene in Shanghai? That's just kind of like, how do you do that? So there's that. You don't have to answer it. I'm just throwing it out there. We are going to go on though. Alyssa has a question. How would I know going into a job, assuming it's full-time, that there's security in it staying full-time and won't be replaced by contract work?
So I wouldn't worry too much about that. I mean, if you're going into the job full time, they already have budget for it. And although contract work is a long-term trend, I wouldn't worry about it. If they're already choosing to hire someone full time, they already believe that they have that need. Generally, I think long term, less full time roles will exist, but that doesn't mean they'll all be gone. And also, like, I wouldn't, you know, if they're hiring a contractor, that's the choice that they're choosing. And for you as an individual, I would just focus on being really good at what you do, because as long as you're really good at what you do, you will find an opportunity. Um, and, I think another interesting thing that's happening right now that is really scary and just something to think about is, in the past, people always said, have 3 to 6 months of saving for a rainy day. But with COVID is going to be longer than 6 months. So I think a lot of people are dealing with that right now. And they were living comfortably in something that they did before that, let's say, I mean, for me, I live in LA. So like actors, they were baristas and they were acting on set. Both of those things can't happen right now. So I think really, people need to rethink how much savings they have for when something happens. But I also think that being able to market yourself and being really good at what you do, you will land on your feet. It's just kind of figuring out that intermediary period. But I really wouldn't work about like if they're gonna, usually, let's say it's a really small company, then maybe they might need a contractor but if they have full-time worth of work for you to do, you're definitely going to do it. And also contractors are being hired to replace the non-main core business, right? Like the core thing that's being done at that company, they're going to need full-time people to do. But all the other things that happen around it, they don't. So like my hospital example, the hospital needs full-time doctors and nurses. They don't need a full-time content marketing strategist. So, but if you're, let's say at, a big company that does a ton of marketing, they are going to need someone full-time marketing. So there are spaces for everything. It's just that a lot of those other roles are going to become contract roles.
Great response. Thank you, Kristen. We have another question here from Dan. Is there a quote, fake it till you make it component of what you're advocating for, or do you not subscribe to that concept?
Good seeing you, Dan. I very much believe in the fake it till you make it. I mean, unfortunately, like people believe how confidently you say something is how credible you come off a lot of times. And interviews are in the moment, trusting that. So my view is it's very much, obviously don't lie or don't extend yourself, but you can highlight what you've done. And from I've helped a lot of people with their resumes, and a lot of times I'm reading it and I'm like, I can tell this person is really good, but their resume is not saying that. It just doesn't come off that they know what they're doing. And so I think a lot of times we as people are afraid to be boastful or are afraid to kind of pump ourselves up, but that's how you get a better job. So I think I encourage people to fake it till they make it and kind of like push a little bit with what they feel comfortable for. Because if you feel you're ready for another job, you're probably ready for it. And it's just, you need to kind of get the word out.
Great. Thank you. We have a couple more questions here. And again, if you have any other questions, feel free to chat them in the chat. Yeah. So from Danya, we have, do we need to ask the former employer to write a recommendation letter in PDF format, or just ask them to post directly on LinkedIn?
I would highly recommend LinkedIn. I think the formal recommendation letter is not as common now. And it's also about visibility. So my view is like a formal recommendation letter, maybe you have an employer who asks for it at the end of the process after they've done an interview with you. Very rarely does that happen. But on LinkedIn, recruiters can see the recommendation. So on LinkedIn, so many more people can see how great you are. So that's why I would definitely recommend that, because it helps you not at the end of the job application process, but it helps you at the beginning get more more job opportunities.
Great. That's really good to hear. I actually took some notes on the whole LinkedIn process, so thank you. Brianna, it's not a question necessarily from Brianna, more of a statement, and just kind of seek your feedback here. Brianna says that she's been told to charge what you're worth, and people will always want the cheaper option, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the best option.
Yeah. So I say no to opportunities all the time, which when I started out was terrifying. And even now is still, especially like when COVID hit, I had definitely some of my clients had to pull back on their marketing. So I had significantly less work, but I was financially in an okay situation. And so in that situation, it's terrifying saying no to work. But I know that if people who are very cheap on price are the worst people to work with. They usually oftentimes don't understand your expertise. I had one person who was like, oh, well, I know this screenwriter and I'm going to have her write my website copy. I'm like, you're having a screenwriter write highly technical SEO copy that every client you ever see writes. I don't know if, I mean, they could be a good writer, but they probably don't know anything about accounting, which was her. So those people can be very difficult to work with. And those are some of the red flags. So that's why, like I said, for me, depending on how many clients I have, I slowly raise my rates. And now I'm at like a significantly higher rate than I was a couple years ago. But the clients, I had another for full-time job. I had another potential client, or excuse me, potential employer. And he was so tough with me on the phone about rates. And I had a career coach who was coaching me. And he was like, if you do really well in 6 months, I'll give you the rate you want. And she was like, if he's not going to pay you the rate you want right now, he's not going to pay it to you in 6 months. And she was right. And so luckily I was able to get the rate that I wanted for that full-time job. A little bit later, I found out that everyone around me was being paid extremely poorly. And I was one of the few that was paid a fair rate. And he had made the same promise to another girl who 6 months in asked him about it. And luckily she had another job offer, so she moved to that job. But he was not going to give it to her. So I just bring that up because, you know, there are little red flags that you see. I mean, I still had a great experience and I learned so much at that company, but listen to what, you know, people show you how they value things. And so you need to have self-worth and you need to believe in what you're offering. And if they can't understand what you're offering, that's not going to be a just when they hire you problem. That's going to be a throughout the relationship problem.
Yeah, great insight there. Thank you. Apparently, the next question is the real question. Can we add you on LinkedIn?
Yes, feel free to add me. Check out my profile to see just kind of like how I formatted things. And if you guys ever have questions, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to like give a little advice or whatever. Yeah, awesome. Definitely. I would love to stay connected.
Well, speaking of that, we do have a couple of other questions here. Have you ever felt burned out while on the job? It's from Aaron.
Yeah.
I'm going to add to this, actually, if I may.
Yeah.
If you have, how did you approach the situation and what did you do?
Yeah. So as someone who's changed careers multiple times, yes, I think one of my greatest flaws and maybe greatest strengths is that I get really bored and I need challenges For example, moving to a country without a job or place to live might be one of those situations. So I am very challenge driven. So for me, I'm very, as a person, I'm very driven by a goal, and I need to be motivated to do that. And I start not doing things as well when I'm bored. So for burnout, I think you really need to figure out what you're passionate about, and maybe that's not always what you're doing at work, and that's totally okay. That's part of like, I do a lot of creative things, and creativity is an important, well, when I was at the academy most recently, it was one of my 4 chosen words. So creativity is really important to me. And so that's why I'm kind of transitioning that way. And for me, that means doing creative stuff outside of some of my other work. So that's writing, and so putting the time aside for that and really hard committing on it. So if you're feeling burnout at work, I think it's important to either look for an opportunity that you feel excited about, or you look for things outside of work that you're a huge fan of. And that could be hobbies. Like for my boyfriend, it's aquascaping fish tanks. He loves it. It's random, but he loves it. And so that's kind of like, look for what are those things that make you happy. And if work is you feel burnout, if it's something that you think you can fix by finding a little bit more balance in other parts of your life, great. If it's something that you don't think that you can change, and it's that you feel your values and are different than your company's values in a way that is not going to fundamentally change, it might be time to look for another job. And I would add on that, a good piece of advice I got is never leave a sinking ship for another sinking ship. So if you're really unhappy at your job, don't go to a mediocre opportunity just to get out of your current situation. You're really just throwing yourself into more turmoil. And when you get out of that job, you're going to be so burnt out and distraught. So I really think you need to wait and find the best kind of opportunity for you. And that may mean staying at your burnt out, sucky job for a little longer than you want to, but you're going to feel so much better when you start that great job.
Awesome. Looks like we have time for just a couple more questions here. And speaking of new opportunities, you kind of transitioned right into this. What are some best resources to find contract work, since those usually get lost in the big job sites and whatnot? Any recommendations to help find contract work?
I mean, I put freelance very prominently on like I said, in the headline, right? Freelance was right there. So I very much focus on that on my LinkedIn. If you're doing another job and you're looking for a side hustle, it's a little bit harder. I would try and do that through my personal network, more through word of mouth. I think you can put on LinkedIn, you can put that it's not public, that you're searching for jobs. And then just in those jobs, I put freelance, whatever as the keywords. But yeah, so I really like I said, LinkedIn. I know Upwork, Fiverr. I don't know about those sites. I feel like people use those to find cheap talent. I would think it would be really hard to build high-paying clients off of those. It is done. And maybe if you're doing it for 2 years, you could really kind of like niche yourself up to that good payment level. But I think it is through word of mouth and through little things you can do to kind of say that you're open to freelance, which obviously when you're working full time is a little more tough. But I'll tell, like when I do catch up calls with my friends, I'll be like, yeah, I'm a little like light right now if you know of anyone, and just like mention it, because that's really where a lot of work comes in.
Awesome. So earlier in the program, you talked about having lived and worked in at least 3 different countries. I may have lost count, but at least 3. So what are some tips you have for adapting to the different business environments in the countries you've worked in?
Oh, yeah. So I mean, working in Europe was very just a different. I'd say working in New York versus LA is also very different cultures. It's way more laid back here. You know, in New York, you walk around with your coffee cup to show that you're busy. In LA, you walk around with your yoga mat to show that you have a life outside work. It's so wherever you're working, there's very different cultures. Obviously, in China, it was a completely different culture. And my best advice is to always listen and never think that the way you do things is the right way to do things. There's so many different ways to solve a problem, and the other person is also trying to solve a problem. So when I was in China, there were a lot of times where I ran into there was how I thought we would solve a problem, and there's how my Chinese coworker thought we would solve a problem. And like their initial thing that they said we should do, I'd be like, what? Like that, just in my mind, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me. And I'm like, okay, but they probably have reasoning that they want to do that. So I say, can you explain? And they'd explain their thinking on how to solve the problem. And I'd be like, oh, that makes total sense. I totally get it. And by using my way of thinking about it and their way of thinking about it, we could find the best solution that worked for both of us. But you just have to be open to that, because I think a lot of times it's, no, this is how I was taught to do it, and this is the right way to do it. There's not always a right way to do things. So it's really about listening and being, open and communicative, and giving the other person, trusting that they also have an idea of what they're doing. I think that's really the best way. And then as you work a place longer, you get any company culture, right? All companies have their own culture. So you kind of have to figure out how that works. And the faster that you can adapt to that, the better you look to your boss. So don't come in with, this is how my old company did it, and this is how I think it should be done. Come in with, hey, in the past I've done it this way. What do you think's the best way? And that is a little bit better of a way to like quickly adapt to whatever company culture you're learning to fit into, or country, or state, city, etc.